In 2007, London Wasps lifted the Heineken Cup for the second time in 4 years, with players such as Danny Cipriani, Joe Worsley and Lawrence Dellaligo. Even as recent as 2020, they were in the Gallagher Premiership Final. But they are now on the precipice of extinction. This is the ruthless rise and fall of Wasps. Wasps are such an old club that they were actually founded as Wasps FC. This happened in 1867 after a split from Hampstead FC, which also saw the creation of Harlequins. In 1871, after Wasps responded to a letter from the Secretary of Richmond FC, the Rugby Football Union was founded. But funnily enough, the Wasps representative actually went to the wrong pub for the meeting, which means Wasps can't actually state that they're a founding member. In the 1930s, the club established itself as one of the best teams in England, even going unbeaten in the 1930-31 season. The 30s also saw a historic figure of the club emerge. Neville Compton captained Wasps from 1939 to 1947, before becoming secretary in 1959 and the club president in 1970, and retiring in 1988. In the 1970s and 80s, Wasps had a massive amount of players represent England and other national teams, and reached 2 John Player finals, which they lost both to Bath. And in 1990, they won their first division title. After this title win, Wasps regularly finished in the top 3, but could never quite beat Bath to another title. In the 95-96 season, in which many were thinking Wasps could make a title push, the Wasps captain left to become player coach of Newcastle Falcons, taking many notable Wasps with him. Wasps looked to be one of the early casualties of professionalism. Under newly appointed captain Lawrence Dellaligo, the club finished 4th and qualified for the Heineken Cup in the first season that English teams took part. In the 96-97 season, Wasps became the first English champions of the professional era. In the same season, the club split into 2, the amateur side and the professional side, which became part of Loftus Road's holdings, along with Queen's Park Rangers FC, which saw them leave their historic Sudbury home and share with QPR. Between 1998 and 2000, Wasps reached the Tetley's Bitter Cup final 3 times, losing to Saracens 18-48 in the first, but beating Newcastle and Northampton in the following 2 seasons. In 1999, the professional outfit of Wasps RFC was renamed to London Wasps to differentiate themselves from the amateur Wasps RFC, and thus began the most successful period in the club's history. In 2003, Wasps would win their first ever European title, beating rivals Bath in the Challenge Cup final and getting one over a team that beat them to many titles in the 90s. In the same season, they beat Gloucester 39-3 in the Premiership final to win their first championship since 1997. But the winning didn't stop there. In the following season, after topping their Heineken Cup group, they beat Gloucester in the quarter-final and Munster in the semi-final, before meeting Toulouse in the final. Wasps would beat the 2-time and reigning champions 27-20 to win their first ever Heineken Cup. They also retained the Premiership crown by beating Bath in the final the week after. Wasps would retain the Premiership title for a second time by beating Leicester Tigers in the 2005 final. In the 2006-07 season, Wasps gained a home quarter-final by topping their Heineken Cup group, where they beat Leinster 35-13. They then went on to beat Northampton in the semi-final at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry 30-13 to reach their second Heineken Cup final. They faced favourites Leicester Tigers, who had already won the Anglo-Welsh Cup and the Premiership, but Wasps would go ahead early in the match and beat Leicester 25-9 to win their second Heineken Cup in 4 seasons. Wasps would start the following season poorly, dropping as low as 10th at one point, but they fought back to reach the playoffs before beating Leicester Tigers in the final to win the Premiership for the 4th time in 6 years. This acted as a fantastic send-off for club captain and legend Lawrence Dellaligo. Wasps had now equalled Bath's 6 league titles and were now 1 behind record holders Leicester. Wasps started to show cracks the following season. After the retirement of their captain, Wasps failed to qualify for the knockouts of the Champions Cup and finished 7th in the league. In the 2010 season, key players such as James Haskell, Tom Palmer and Ricky Flutie all moved to France, and Ian Redden joined Leinster. In February of that season, it was also announced that Maverick fly half Danny Cipriani would leave to join Melbourne Rebels. Wasps would have the worst season in 2011-12, where they narrowly avoided relegation by finishing 11th, only 5 years after being champions of Europe. After an 8th place finish in the 2012-13 season, being 17 points outside the playoffs and 18 points outside the next season, along with reporting yearly losses of over £3 million, London Wasps felt a change was needed. On the 14th of June 2014, London Wasps announced they would drop the London prefix. And from December, they had moved to Coventry, into the same stadium where they won a Heineken Cup semi-final 8 years previous. At first, the move appeared to be inspired, as Wasps finished third in their first full season before topping the Premiership in their second, but were unable to overcome Exeter in the final. They finished third again in the 2017-18 season and second in the 1920 season, where they lost in the final again to Exeter. This is where the problems started. They were unable to repay £35 million from a bond scheme in May of 2022 for the Coventry Building Society arena, which is similar to a loan except you don't pay back in instalments. You have a set day in which you pay back the whole sum, I think, and £2 million of unpaid taxes. This coincided with an 8th place finish in 2021 and a 9th place in 2022. And on the 17th of October 2022, Wasps entered administration, and they are expected to be relegated from the Premiership, only weeks after Worcester Warriors fared a similar fate, and now face the prospect of liquidation.